Hi there. You want me to tell you what death anxiety is? Well, it's simple, isn't it? Death anxiety is the anxiety of dying, except that it isn't necessarily that at all. Lots of people think they're experiencing death anxiety when they're having a panic attack, when their heart starts beating really fast and they're feeling totally overwhelmed and they're breaking out into a hot sweat and they can't breathe properly anymore and they can't think clearly anymore. And they might think that they're going to die and that therefore this feeling is a feeling of death anxiety. But it isn't really. When a person has a panic attack, it usually is because they're terribly frightened that they're not good enough or that they're not getting something right, that somebody will judge them, that they are falling short. It's more a kind of neurotic anxiety that goes wrong on them, that starts whirling around faster and faster so that they get more and more adrenaline shooting through their bodies, and so much so that the heart starts hammering away and they might even feel they're going to lose consciousness. But of course, if they do lose consciousness, that might be a terrific relief, because when you lose consciousness, then you don't have to worry about things anymore. And it is the worry about not being good enough or not getting it right that gives you the panic attack in the first place. So that isn't really about death anxiety. It is about the anxiety of failure, the anxiety of annihilation, the anxiety of not being good enough, of being inferior in some sort of respect. So that is a whole different topic in its own right. I'll talk about that some other time. But let me get back to death anxiety now. So people do have death anxiety. They do worry terribly about growing older and about dying. And this is very much about not knowing what it all means, and also having a terrific sense of loss at all the good things they have accumulated in life and they don't want to let go of. So the more you hold on to things in your life, the more difficult it may be to move towards death. But we all know some people who, instead of struggling when they know they're going to die, actually very elegantly give in to it and let themselves be moved towards it. And I think that's the real key to death anxiety, or the resolution of death anxiety. It is about letting go, it's about giving in, it's about stopping trying to get things so right. So the exact opposite of the problems around panic. Death anxiety is to be tense about giving up and letting go. It's about not daring to fail and efface yourself and merge with whatever it is you merge with when you fall asleep, or whatever it is you merge with when you die into that darkness, or maybe, as some people think, die into the light. I've often wondered, watching people dying, whether we make our own death, because some people do seem to go towards darkness when they die, and they seem to fade into it and lose consciousness sort of gradually, and darkening happens. And other people do seem to have an experience of a lightening and a kind of releasement, a kind of letting go of all the tensions and finding an easier, softer, gentler, much lighter way of being, which they would then call death, or that leads to their body actually dying. Of course, none of us know what death really is, apart from the fact that we know that the body dies and gives up and doesn't function any longer. We don't really know what happens to this sort of essence of the person that some people call the soul, and some people call the self, and some people call the me or the ego, and some people call the spirit. I like to think of it as a spark of life that lives inside of us. And if you've ever seen one of your pets dying, you will know that there is definitely something about that that is very mysterious. You can't just deal with it by positivism and saying, okay, the body has conked out and the body will rot. These things are true. But at the moment of death, there is a definite feeling that this cat or this dog or this person relinquishes something, that something changes all of a sudden, that some ephemeral essence of something or other has disappeared. It's not surprising that people have formed these images about death and the soul sort of taking wings and flying away into being. I think we know very little about it all, and it doesn't really matter what happens to a person after their death as an individual, I don't think, but it does matter enormously whether there is something more to it than just the dying of the body. And it, of course, all depends how we conceive of life, and I think that is the key to death anxiety as well. If a person thinks that there is nothing but rotting of the body after death, they're often much more tense for obvious reasons, and they're much more reluctant to go into that state than if a person has an image of this lightening towards something, this kind of retrieving of some more basic state of being which doesn't need a body, a kind of flowing into the universe in some way or another which we don't know about, a kind of joining of hands with other spirits or with an ephemeral oneness of being that it's actually extremely attractive to unify yourself with and to let yourself flow into. And whenever a person has that kind of image, be that a religious image or an atheistic image, but some image of nature being a reservoir that we return to, and that in some ways the spiritual energy that we have honed while we were alive will find a better way to express itself or to be in a easier way, a kind of more natural way than in a human body. If a person has that kind of feeling about dying, in actual fact, their dying becomes a lot easier. And I think that's very similar to when you give birth to a child. And men can't understand this, but any woman who have given birth will know how bizarre it is that every baby has a sort of an essence right from the start. One baby is completely different to another, and the moment they are born, there is this incredibly miraculous sense of something new, some essential spark of being suddenly joining you in the room. And while their body was quite quickened and alive inside of you when you were pregnant, it is only after they are born and they kind of open their eyes and come to this human life that it feels as if they are kicked into existence, as if something is set alight, as if something has been started. And so I think the something that is started at birth is the something that releases and relinquishes something at death too. And I like to think of that as the human spirit. And the human spirit is most manifest in ideas. And some of the best ways in which the human spirit manifests itself is in scientific investigations and studies. I think there is no funnier paradox than to see scientists talking against such experiences when they are so good at experiencing it for themselves, when they have such a strong sense of awe and reverence for nature. I think that is exactly what we're talking about here. A kind of understanding that there is something greater than human beings, and that the human spirit, whatever it is, that tiny little bit of it that is in each of us, can certainly be sort of grown during a lifetime, but the more you grow it, the more it is ready to go and join the overall oneness of spirit. So the more we are easy about that and try to avoid making it a very individualistic business, making it a rather more transpersonal business, something that unites us and that unites us with the universe, with the cosmos of what is, then the anxiety of death will be turned into the gladness of death and into the kind of wonder of death, exactly in the same way in which the anxiety of birth or giving birth is always transformed into a miracle of birth and of receiving the new life. So, to stop having death anxiety is about understanding better about life and death, and about stopping to think that it's all up to you to work it out, or that you're so totally responsible for it all, or so totally in control, or have such great authority about it all, or have to know it all, and to accept that some things are mysterious, and that giving over to the mystery gives you resolution of all your problems and gives you a way to overcome those very human anxieties and merge your spirit with whatever it is that is greater than us, that knows the way. Go safely on your way and don't carry your death anxiety too heavily on your shoulders.